Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. And what I'm doing on this video is playing catch up. It seems such a while since I actually spoke to you, and so much has happened. And I felt really we need to catch up with what's going on and get a real perspective on it, which is one of the great things that astrology can do, of course. And then hopefully we'll get back on track as the weeks go by with more than 2 videos a month. And I do apologize for those of you who feel kind of left stranded. But it's all in a good cause, all in a lot of other work being done in a lot of other places. So I'm going to start really by a couple of things. You know, I write my Friday Bites every Friday on Astrolutely, and that really gives a perspective on the week that's just gone by and sort of keeps everybody abreast about what's going on in the astrology. But that's you can read. It's not what I talk about. But one of the things I have been saying is that we definitely live in accelerated times. Things are moving so quickly. And I know a lot of people are talking about that in their own lives. They're sort of saying, what happened to the time? Christmas seems, ages ago. And in fact, it isn't that long ago. But really, in terms of the world, we have seen so much going on since the 2025 opened. Such a lot of stuff in every corner of the world, practically. We've had natural disasters. We've had things like the LA fires. We've had floods in places. We've had the whole island of Santorini practically evacuated because of earth tremors. I mean, the earth has been saying, I can't deal with these accelerated times. And of course, since then, we've had the whole ceasefire occur between Israel and Hamas, that just on the eve of President Trump's inauguration. And that at the time I'm recording this, and it's the 19th of, no, it's not, it's the 16th of February, it's still holding. I wouldn't say it's solid, it's a little bit fragile, but it is holding. And of course, since then, we've had a whole lot of flurries in terms of what's been going on in government in the USA, and also in terms of the war in Ukraine. So I want to catch up a little bit on all of that. And, I made a note of it. It's sort of 46 days since the year began, and 26 days since Donald Trump was inaugurated. And as I say, everything has been turned upside down. We're having to catch our breath. And I know from my clients and from my friends, things have happened. There have been marriage breakups, unexpected. There have been diagnoses, health diagnoses, which have been very upsetting. And there have been all sorts of things developing in business, people losing their jobs or getting fabulous promotions. So it has been an extraordinary time. So the first thing I wanted to look at was Elon Musk, because I certainly haven't talked about him on my channel. And I think he is very worthy of being discussed. In last Friday's Friday Bite, which was the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, the picture I used in front of the article was, in fact, that really the extraordinary scenes in the Oval Office with Trump sitting down at his desk and Elon Musk standing in a T-shirt and a jacket, and his little 4-year-old son, X, on the floor, being very, very precocious, we might say. And I think I said in my Friday Bite, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and I think it is. And, I have looked at Elon Musk's chart on my Friday Bites, and I think the most recent time I looked at it, I sort of said I find it very difficult to find the genius in this chart. You know, it isn't one of those charts that leaps out at you and screams, you know, I'm going to rule the world. You know, it doesn't do that. The more you look into it, the more you find. And I certainly thought that that would be a good place for us to start this particular video on. So I'm going to start by looking at Elon Musk's chart. And I want to point out certain things to you here. And you probably get what I mean when I say, you know, what is it? Is this really the chart of someone who is so unbelievably powerful, the richest man in the world? So here's a thing. Let's look at that moon in the second house. Do you know how many people think that if you've got the moon in the second house, your fortunes will fluctuate, and it's actually quite difficult to make a lot of money with the moon in the second house? But hey, guess what? This is the chart of a gazillionaire. So no, we have to blow that chestnut away. What I think we might want to look at here too, which is of interest, you might want to look at the sun, which is technically in the 12th house. Surely 12th house people are behind the scenes kind of people. These are the people who retreat from life, who are in a little bit of a bubble and don't communicate too well, you know, like to have their own space and aren't particularly interested in being in the limelight or doing anything that's particularly you know, front forward. And it's surprising how many actors and artists have the sun in the 12th house. And when you think actors, of course, are on stage all the time, but they're wearing a mask, you know, so they can project whatever it is as long as they're not being themselves. And I find this quite interesting with Elon, in that you might think, well, sun in the 12th house, he's projecting a mask. The man is behind the mask, and I find that interesting. Clearly, he's a great communicator, but we get that really from Mercury sitting on his ascendant there. Mercury in Cancer, here is the great communicator, and he is a brilliant communicator. And let's not forget, he actually owns X, which was originally Twitter, and he tweets and X's all the time. So he is forever communicating. And you'll notice that with people who have Mercury rising in their charts. But I also want to point out the position of the sun, because the sun being in between about 8 and 10, 8 to 12 degrees above the horizon is in fact what I call a power point in the chart. A lot of people who have planets at this point, that planet is a super powerful planet. And it's the same really with the sun here. So don't get misled and think, well, the sun is in the 12th house, so he's not projecting. It's not a strong sun. In terms of how many degrees above the horizon it is a super strong sun, a very strong force of life, a force of nature. This is what we get from Elon. I don't have to tell you anything. He does it all for himself. Where I'm going to go now is where I think we might see this extraordinary showman, this extraordinary genius, really. I mean, is he an intellectual genius? I'm not sure about that. He's certainly bright, but I think his genius lies in entrepreneurialism. And I think he is a brilliant man at seeing what can be done and getting people behind what can be done. And I think we're going to find that really in that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in the 5th house there, which is around about the 5 o'clock position in this particular chart. So Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions happen every 13 years or so. The last one that we had was in April the 12th of 2022. So people born, in that year are going to have a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in their charts. And I think this is Well, it's a lot of things. We could be looking at the highest end of somebody who's very highly spiritually motivated, given to mystical experiences, very humanitarian, and also deeply religious, deeply spiritual. That is that Jupiter-Neptune combo. But we also get here the genius in someone, the Jupiter-Neptune, the Neptune giving you the vision, the Jupiter giving you the expanded vision. And what also we get from here is delusions of grandeur and the inability to know when to stop. I mean, it's like ever expanding horizons. There has to be a point at which things stop. Not for Elon. He just expands. But it's like everything, it will contract at some point. And there's another kind of Jupiter-Neptune character who I think is very similar to Elon, and that's Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, who was in charge of us Brits, when we had COVID. And if you know what a charmer Boris was, how really engaging, charismatic he is, just like Elon. But of course, not given to telling the truth. And I think that a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in your chart does give you to embroidering the truth and stretching it, to suit whatever it is. And 2 or 3 weeks back, again in my Friday Bite, I talked about Germany and the rise of Hitler, and a very important figure at that time who owned 14,000 newspapers, and he put himself behind Hitler. And he developed or coined an expression called catastrophic politik, and it really meant the politics of catastrophe. So he would spout lies and expand stories, really in the spirit of, politics first, truth later. And I think we've got Elon doing exactly the same, as indeed we've seen with Mr. Trump as well, spouting lies, but actually in pursuit of the bigger truth. Does it really matter that you've lied? Ends justify the means. It's entertainment. It's all of that, grandstanding. So I think a Jupiter-Neptune character will often have that. But of course, if we look there, we can see that Saturn is opposing that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, Saturn at 1 degree of Gemini. And there are 2 ways of looking at this. We could look at the fact that Saturn is restraining the exuberance of that Jupiter-Neptune, actually preventing it from becoming too much. Or we could look at it in the sense of saying, everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there will be an end. There will be restraint ultimately to this expansion principle. And of course, when Uranus comes to that Saturn, which it will do in the July of this year, 2025, we are going to see some very interesting sparks flying. I know a lot of people have thought this is when Elon will fall off his perch, but actually we've got a few more things before that time. I do think, let me go on a bit and point out a few other things about this chart that I think you might find really, really interesting. Take a look at that chart for a minute and see the sun at 5 degrees of Cancer. That is the United States Jupiter. So his sun sits on the Jupiter. So what is great about the USA? Well, it's Elon Musk. How fitting is that? By progression, we see that the progressed midheaven has come to 19 of Gemini. And what is at 19 of Gemini in Elon's chart but Venus? Also, we see that there is the progressed sun is squaring natal Jupiter. So we get this feeling that he is a man whose time has come. That's what I would say. But it's a bit like, and I've used this analogy before, the sun at midsummer, when we celebrate the longest day and the shortest night. The sun we, the Earth, closest, tilted towards the sun. It's a point at which everything is magnificent. But of course, that's the beginning of the end. The sun or the Earth starts to move away from the sun again, things decline. And I have a feeling I'm looking at, from my intuition, that this is a year of decline. At some point, we haven't quite got to the peak yet, but as soon as the peak is hit, then it is decline thereafter. So we'll have to wait and see in the fulfillment of time. But I'm sure that some of you will be also interested in the idea of how does his chart fit with Donald Trump. So let's have a quick look at Donald Trump's chart here, which I'm sure a lot of you are quite familiar with. You'll notice from Donald Trump's chart that Neptune and Jupiter, they're not conjunct. They're in the same sign, and Chiron kind of links them. So there is a hint of Jupiter-Neptune with Trump as well. So they're kind of kindred Jupiter-Neptune spirits. And again, I'm drawn to looking at the second house of self-worth and finance. Well, if we just had Jupiter there, we might think, oh, loads of money, which of course Mr. Trump apparently has. But we look at Neptune in the second house and people would think, no, you lose money. You're not interested in money. You're more interested in humanity. You are the soul of, humanitarianism. You give to the poor. And a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, I think, in the second house would lead one to feel somehow that there is an aggrandizement, a kind of false, there's the illusion of money. And there is a sense that money and power are illusory. And I want us to look at that. But as I said, to have, when you share aspects with someone in your chart, there is, especially when there are important aspects, there is a sense of being on the same page. There's some part of your DNA which is somehow aligned with that person. So I think we start off with that principle. What we also need to look at is that in Donald Trump's 10th house, up there in the noon position, we've got Uranus at 17 Gemini, the North Node at 20 Gemini, the Sun at 22 Gemini, all opposite the Moon at 21 Sagittarius. And of course, as we can see with the Sun being close to the North Node, then obviously he was born at the time of an eclipse, and he was born on an eclipse. But when we think about Elon Musk, his Venus is at 19 of Gemini. So that really powerful point of Donald Trump's chart is connected to Elon Musk. And we could say that his future is intertwined with Elon Musk. He's connected to Elon Musk. Now, Donald Trump has Mars at 26 of Leo, and Elon Musk has Mars at 20 of Aquarius. Now, oppositions are really, well, like all polarities, they unite as well as separate. And Mars in Leo and Mars in Aquarius are opposites in the sense that we have the humanitarian spirit of Aquarius, the bohemian aspect of Aquarius, versus the grand and kind of sun-like Mars in Leo, which seeks to be the center of the universe. So, but in a sense, they're not opposed to each other. They're probably more vibrating or resonating at the same spirit. So I think their Marses are aligned in some way. And so that spirit of let's get ahead, let's cut out all this ridiculousness that's preventing us from making something happen, which is admirable. I mean, I'm one of those people. I don't like bureaucracy. I don't like things that prevent a great idea from coming into reality. And that principle is at the heart, I think, of this bulldozing of everything in government. It's like, let's get rid of all these boulders that are holding back the force of progress. But, it needs restraint. I'm not going to get into that too much, but of course, all these rumors of constitutional crisis are to do with this complete disdain for bureaucracy and the running of a government, which is preventing, certainly according or from the perspective of Mr. Trump, President Trump, and Elon Musk, the idea of progress, the idea of getting things done, making America great again. Was there anything else I wanted to talk about here? No, I think I'm probably done on this one, because what I want to move ahead to now, I mean, just to recap, because I know a lot of people debate, whether, are Elon Musk and Donald Trump best buddies? And, even if they are, will it last? I mean, they're similar in some respects and very different in others. And of course, they're very different ages. And I think both men are capable of knowing or how to use people. And I'm sure Donald Trump, though he might not admit it, is using Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is using Donald Trump. But at some point, when you've got similarities, and I'm reminded again of Germany pre-war and Hitler's rise to power. Hugenberg, I forget his name. This is the billionaire, so to speak, the very, very wealthy man who had all these newspapers, and who did a deal with Hitler, that, he would promote him and he would use his newspaper's voice to do anything and everything to get Hitler to the chancellorship. But the deal was that he would have a place in the cabinet. And it all did ultimately go pear-shaped, because they were dissimilar in some ways and too similar in others, and their stubbornness, their kind of tunnel vision about things they shared, but ultimately it was those things that drove them apart. And I think that's what we're going to find with Elon Musk and Donald Trump, is that their similarities will drive them apart ultimately, almost more than their differences, really. And, well, we will see in the fullness of time. But that being said, I don't think we've got a lot of time to wait. I mean, by the time we get to July, as you could see, Saturn will be on Musk's, Uranus will be on Musk's Saturn. And so that means a real shift in situations. Is it an elevation? Is it a demotion? We have to wait and see. But, I think times before that, as Saturn opposes or squares, I'm just trying to get the picture right. Yes, it will square Musk's Jupiter Neptune conjunction. I think we might see that period of time, and that's really May, late April, May, being a time of transition for Musk. And I think his power will be in debate at that point. So I think we're going to get there fairly soon. So the next thing I want to look at, and I did do a little video on this in one of my shorts, because I was so concerned I hadn't spoken to you for so long. And I did briefly look at the full moon in Leo. And I mentioned very briefly that the full moon was hugely important for Russia, Ukraine, and Trump. This, because of the way it connected with all their charts. And in due course, I was right, because it was actually on the day of the full moon that everything came out about the conversation President Trump had with Putin. And suddenly Ukraine wasn't even at the table to discuss the future of Ukraine and Russia. Neither was Europe, and the UK were all out of the mix, and the power brokers here, Putin and Trump. It's to all intents and purposes, we're looking at this new world order, and it got everybody extremely concerned. And I mean, people pushed back after that, although, as you know, J.D. Vance was unequivocal in his disdain for Europe. and Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, was also absolutely adamant that the US had greater priorities than messing around helping other people in distant parts of the world. So this full moon brought absolutely all of that to a head. And so I'm just going to show you a picture of that full moon, first of all, so that you can get to see why it was so important. I've actually got this one set from the perspective of Moscow. But of course, the degrees are the same. Wherever you are in the world, it will just fall in a different area of the chart. And the significant thing about this full moon was not that it was just at 24 degrees Leo, 24 degrees Aquarius, but it was closely squaring Uranus. And Uranus is all about breakthroughs, which of course you could see this, the discussions, the fact that Putin is being brought into back into the frame as far as discussing things are concerned. There was a breakthrough, but it was also a breakdown in terms of relations. When you think about the USA, you think about the UK, you think about Europe, and Ukraine. My goodness, what a slap in the face. So it really was a crisis of huge proportions, of historical proportions. And I think we're going to be remembering this full moon in Leo for a long time to come. Now, if we take that full moon and we look, first of all, at the chart of the USA, I want you to keep those figures in your mind. We can see that why I said it's going to be important for the USA is if we look there at the 7 o'clock position, we can see the moon in Aquarius, 27 of Aquarius. So the full moon at almost, 24, 25 is quite close to that. And so the full moon is on that moon. And of course, back in August of last year, we had the full moon also on that degree. So these past 6 months have been an extraordinary journey, if you like, in terms of the astrology, the full moon, the new moon, all of it playing into these very, very important situations in the world. And, just come back to me for a second. We'll come back and look at the US chart in a minute. But also, when you think in these last few weeks, we've also had this complete breakthrough in the Israel-Hamas situation. And guess where Israel's sun is? It's 23 degrees of Taurus. So we've got Uranus on that. And here comes this full moon also squaring that sun. And actually, the sun, the full moon itself, was on Israel's Mars. So you can see how these planetary events are playing into, giving us these pinnacles, these peaks, these stress points as we see the astrology play out very, very clearly. So let's go back and have a look at the US chart again, because what I want to point out to you here, which is of such huge interest at the moment, the progressed midheaven, and I use solar arc progressions, for those of you who'd like to know, the progressed midheaven has reached 8 degrees of Gemini. And if you look there, where is that? In the US chart, it's on Uranus. So we know this is a time of huge change for the United States. We don't need anyone to tell us that. We can see it, and we can know that there's revolution. Well, it is a revolution, but believe you me, it's a revolution taking place there. Maybe, no guns going off or anything and nobody entering the Capitol building this time, but nonetheless, it's a revolution. And that's Uranus on, the progressed midheaven having reached Uranus. Now, the other thing that we also want to look at here, aside from the full moon, is, well, we talked about Pluto a lot, that Pluto has just passed its natal position. It's just completed its Pluto return. And of course, in a Pluto return, you've also got reformation. And this has been going on for a while. This has been going on for 2 to 3 years. But we certainly saw it made manifest on the 20th of January this year with the Sun-Pluto conjunction in Aquarius, just past the natal Pluto there. I want to also draw your attention in this chart to the IC, that's the bottom of that line running across from north to south, MCIC axis. And we have 1 degree of Aries at the base of the chart there. And in the end of March, Neptune is going to be on that point, or getting to that point. It's going to be in Aries. And by the time we get to May, Saturn also in Aries. So we've got a Saturn-Neptune conjunction on the IC. Now that is going to be of huge importance to the United States going forward. And the last time we had a play on Saturn-Neptune was that we had the American Civil War. We know that it was fought on ideals, Abraham Lincoln's desire to abolish slavery and to have a more democratic country. And this time we're going to see a similar struggle somehow. It's ideological as well as it is in terms of power. I mean, it's both. And we're at the beginning of this, and we're by no means near the end. This is just beginning. And what is so interesting at the moment is that Neptune is, round about, 27, 28, 29 degrees of Pisces. It's going to head into, 0 degrees on the 30th of March. And it's up close and personal to the fixed star Shet. And that's that letter B that you can see there. And I've talked about this a lot again in my Friday Bites, because the fixed star Shet is one of the most unfortunate fixed stars. It has a lot to do with the sea, has a lot to do with water, deluges, tsunamis. It has to do with devastation of one sort or another. I found it quite interesting that when I looked at the Californian fires that centered themselves around Los Angeles, here we had Neptune rising at the moment the first fire caught, and Shet, of course, right by it. And what was the issue there? Well, it was water. There wasn't enough water to put the fires out, and even where there was water, they couldn't be put out because of the strength of the winds. And we're also looking at Shet and Neptune in terms of what was going on in Santorini when there were so many earthquakes in a very, very short period of time, hence the evacuation of most of the inhabitants of the island. Again, Neptune and Shet. So we have to know that this is a very destabilizing kind of influence on the USA chart. And I wouldn't rule out, other weather-borne disasters, natural disasters playing in at this time, especially around the time of the lunar eclipse, because the lunar eclipse coming up on the 14th of March is going to be at 23 Virgo Pisces, and that is on the United States Neptune. So we have a double whammy. We have transiting Neptune, we've got natal Neptune, we've got Shet, we've got a lunar eclipse. So we are certainly going to see some very, very powerful developments in the middle of March towards the end of March. A lot of destabilization, definitely in regards to the people and to the government. Okay, so I'm going to move on from there. And remember the full moon chart, 24 Leo Aquarius. If I put this chart up now and let you have a look at it, this is the chart of Russia. And you can see there the ascendant-descendant axis of Russia, 25 Leo, 25 Aquarius setting. And I know you will see some other charts for Russia, some of them a little earlier in December, and these are all part when things were signed. There was even one in August, I think, where something was agreed. But actually, symbolically, it was at this point that the Soviet Union flag was lowered and the new Russian flag was raised, and it is seen as a very powerful symbolic moment for Russia. A lot of people see that as significant, and this gives us 25 Leo rising, 25 of Aquarius setting. And as we can see, no arguments. This recent full moon has really completed a cycle for Russia. It may be the thing that signals the end of the war, the end of the invasion of Ukraine. There it is in, absolute stark, it's on Russia's ascendant-descendant axis, but also Uranus, of course, squaring it. How quickly did that happen? How unexpected was it? And we have a real kind of, unfolding of the astrological story in this particular chart. So I want to now put up Ukraine's chart, because when the Soviet Union broke up officially in 1991, it started in 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell. East met West, and there was this sense of jubilation that, there was no East-West divide anymore. Boundaries had been dissolved. And of course, that's the essence of a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which was what oversaw that particular fall of the Berlin Wall. But of course, that was the signal for the collapse of the Soviet Union, which took a little bit longer to take place. But as you could see in the USA chart, the flag was lowered and the other one raised. But August was an important point, and in August 1991, this is when Ukraine had got its independence. And here we are again, Moon in Aquarius, 22 degrees of Aquarius. Opposition, Jupiter at 25 Leo, Mercury 26 of Leo, and Venus at 28 of Leo. So the recent full moon again fell on that axis in Ukraine's chart. And of course, Uranus squared it. What a shock to the system. Out of the blue, all of this happening with Ukraine not even at the table at that point. Pluto, as you will notice, at 1 degree of Aquarius is on natal Saturn. And Pluto-Saturn combos, whether you've got transiting Saturn angling Pluto, or you've got transiting Pluto angling Saturn, these are life and death struggles, always. And in all of our lives, it might be a life and death struggle over money. We might be ill and have a life and death struggle. It might be a relationship in which there's a life and death struggle. Or in this case, what we're seeing in Ukraine, of course, is an absolute struggle for its very existence. And that is Pluto conjoined to Saturn. And I want to say at this point, and I know all of you out there, love astrology. It's why you bother to watch me and take an interest in it. But when you see this kind of poetry, doesn't it make you think, world, come and look at this? If astrology isn't valid, if astrology isn't telling the story of our times, what else is it doing? Let's look at it. Let's take something away from it, because it is a magnificent art. It is a divine art. And we are seeing it in this video that I'm, putting together right now, in the charts that I'm showing you, how resonant it is, how relevant it is. So I've got one other chart that I want to show you before I come back to me completely, and that is the chart of NATO. And NATO was formed in 1949, with the mission that Europe would never, ever be divided again. And it's gone from 12 member states, which it was in 1949, to I think 32 at this point in time. And so NATO is a transatlantic alliance, of which the USA is the biggest partner. I mean, everybody in NATO has to agree to something important, but I mean, if one state can prevent agreement, and if that state happens to be the United States, which is the biggest, the most mighty in terms of military might and wealth, then really, nothing happens without the USA. So really and truly, NATO is at a crisis point, and it may well face, I'm not saying NATO will break up, it won't. But I do think that there is a very strong likelihood that the US will leave the Union, which would be a very sad state of affairs. But it's all going to come back to this full moon, which happened the other day. And it was very interesting that by progression, NATO's moon and Saturn have come to an exact conjunction at 22 Scorpio. And so that full moon was squaring that progression, and Uranus was opposing it. And you've got this big grand cross bringing all of this up to a crisis at this moment in time. Progressed Pluto is 0 degrees of Scorpio. So progressed Pluto coming up to the ascendant-descendant axis. So there's going to be a huge transformation of its members. And of course, Pluto right now at 2 degrees of Aquarius 28 is squaring the ascendant-descendant axis of NATO, which is why we are in an absolute, crisis. NATO is in crisis. And my belief, I don't know how long it'll take, but I do think that, the United States is done with NATO. I think that's what we're looking at, not today, but certainly it's not going to be part of any, real military, any more help than it has already done for Ukraine. And of course, without that, Europe is very powerless, and it doesn't bode well for Ukraine in the future. Going forward, any deal that's made, I think we're still in danger. But we haven't got there yet. So I want to look at where I am on my notes. I have notes just in case I lose my place. And I think, yes, I probably want to round this up. I didn't want this to be an incredibly long video, but I did think it was important. I did think we needed to be abreast of what's going on. And it comes again to what I was talking about quite recently, Friday, Saturday, just, a day or so ago. And I talked about Pluto and Aquarius, and how when we look at the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, and it was just after America had, the founding fathers had formed all the states of America. And, thereafter, there were lots of revolutions at that time, the American Revolution, of course, and also the French Revolution. And Uranus is known for its revolutionary qualities. But Pluto, of course, is also, in a way, there's a lot of reformation and transformation going on. So we looked at that period of time as one of a new era. And I talked about the idea that it was a giant step for mankind, even though in 1778, there was no internet, no smartphones, so you couldn't see what was going on in the rest of the world, and you couldn't perceive that everything was changing. Whereas here we are in 2025, and we have all the news at the flick of a switch any single second, and we can see quite clearly that everything about us is changing, that we are moving into a new world. It was a new world in 1778 that was coming about, and it is a new world coming about in 2025 and beyond. And like all points, the very beginning, that change from Capricorn to Aquarius, the stormiest, most difficult period, we are transitioning to that. It will go on for 3 or 4 more years, to get this stormy, turbulent period over. And we're already seeing the kind of map of the new world being drawn up. I think I heard somebody saying we could see the world being carved up right now between China and Russia and the United States. We'll wait and see. It looks like that at the moment. But I think that what I was sort of hoping to get at really was, again, this idea that Aquarius is this humanitarian sign. And we get this idea, this is for the people. I mean, even enshrined in the Constitution it's we the people, equality, fraternity, all of it enshrined, the Aquarian principle enshrined in the Constitution. And here we are again, we've got the idea that surely this is about the people, the benefit of the people. And I'm thinking, this is a call to arms, people. We are the people. And maybe it's too soon to start getting out in the streets and fighting for our country, which is ironic when you think about one of the kind of, the statements that Trump made all the time: if you won't have a country unless you fight for it. And the interesting thing is, I think that we everywhere in the world need to fight for our country now, in terms of we the people make the country. And therefore, we the people need to stand up for ourselves. And when you see all that moon in Aquarius, the USA has the moon in Aquarius. We have Ukraine with the moon in Aquarius. And we think about that's the people. And we are the people. I am the people. You are the people. That it's time not to sit back and say, I can't do anything. There's nothing I can do. I'll just sit back and watch it all happen. What will be, will be. Well, no, it won't. We have to use our voices. We have to use every means we have to know what's right, to know what's right for us. I think that's terribly important. And we need to fight for truth because of all the disinformation that's going on. We need to be scrupulous with that. We need to fact check, not just take one person's word for it, to go through all sorts of recognized sources who are known for truth telling. That's who we need to refer to find out what is going on. And never lose sight of the truth. Never lose sight of what matters to us and what is worth fighting for. And yes, if I have to get out on the streets, I will. And maybe it's going to come to that, certainly in the United States, sooner than later. Okay, so are we up to speed? I hope so. And I look forward to speaking to you in a couple of weeks' time. Bye for now.